West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte. I
want to turn to politics now. Fulton County, Georgia, which will undergo another audit of 2020 absentee ballots following claims of fraud. The Friday ruling by a judge allows for the ballots to be unsealed and reviewed by a group of electors claiming Fulton County election workers counted fraudulent ballots. The review will be done under the guidance and supervision of a special master appointed by the court. It comes after the group filed a lawsuit in December. The state of Georgia conducted 3 audits soon after the election, all of which reaffirmed the original outcome of the race. Meanwhile, Republican Congresswoman Lynn Cheney continues to speak out, sitting down with national political reporter for Axios, Jonathan Swan, for Axios on HBO.
You're trying to chart a new course for the party, away from Donald Trump, away from the lie, and it just seems like there aren't people willing to buy what you're selling. Where do you get the hope for this, that this is going to work?
Because I love this country,
right?
Because I believe in our democracy, and I believe in our constitutional process and system, and because I look at it from the perspective of what's right. I think the future of our party has to be built around ideas. It has to be built around substance.
But which ideas?
And so I think we have to be able to make a substantive case for limited government, for low taxes, for a strong national defense, for securing our borders. The ideas and the substance and the policy are on our side, but we have to get back to a place where we're making those arguments.
How much culpability do Republican elites have for fertilizing the soil for the big lie?
That's not at all how I think about it. You won't be surprised to hear. I think that when you look at things like voter fraud, it certainly exists. I will never understand the resistance, for example, to voter ID. I think you ought to have to show ID to go vote. There's a big difference between that and a president of the United States who loses an election after he tried to steal the election and refuses to concede and then continues to say the election was stolen, suggesting that our democratic process is insufficient of conveying the will of the people.
You don't see any linkage between Donald Trump saying the election's stolen and then Republicans in all of these state legislatures rushing to put in place these restrictive voter laws?
Well, I think you have to look at the specifics of each one of those efforts. I think if you look at the Georgia laws, for example, there's been a lot that's been said nationally about the Georgia voter laws that turns out not to be true.
But even the Republican Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, said that when this bill started to pick up momentum was when Rudy Giuliani was testifying that the Georgia election was a sham. I don't think anyone doubts that the reason 400-some voting bills have been introduced, 90% by Republicans, supported by the Republican National Committee. I don't think it's a coincidence after the election that this has happened.
Look, I think everybody should want a situation and a system where people who ought to be able to vote and have the right to vote can vote, and people who, don't, shouldn't. And again, I come back to things like
But what problem are they solving for? There's not what are all these states doing?
No, I think, each state is different.
What was the big problem in Georgia that needed to be solved by a new law? What was the big problem in Texas? What was the big problem in Florida? These laws are coming all around the states, and what are they solving for?
I think you've got to look at each individual state law. But I think what we can all agree on...
You can't divorce them from the context.
Well, yeah, but I think what we can agree on is that what is happening right now is really dangerous. When I think about 2000, think about sitting on the inaugural platform in January of 2001, watching Al Gore. And of course, we had won. I'm sure he didn't think he had lost. Mm-hmm. We had fought this politically very, very intense battle, and he conceded. He did the right thing for this nation. And that is one of the big differences between that and what we're dealing with now, and the danger of Donald Trump today.
And Jonathan joins us now. And Joe, I want to go back to Jonathan's first question for Liz Cheney, which is, where are you going to get the support?
Right. I
found one person in Florida yesterday at a birthday party, diehard Republican, worked in the financial industry his whole life, turned independent only because of Trump. But if someone like Liz Cheney were to come along, he'd become a real, true Republican again. And the conversation was much like the ones we have, where the Republicans are turning the party into something it's not. It is the insurrectionist party. Then there are real Republicans, and the question is how many will coalesce in that group, and the Democrats. And we need a real Republican Party. What we don't need in this country is an insurrectionist party, and there is no conversation to be had with an insurrectionist, with a party that doesn't even want to believe in basic truths.
Well, a party that believes that democracy, American democracy, is okay only when their side wins. I think you bring up a great point. We have three parties in America now. We have the Republican Party, we have the Democratic Party, and we have the Insurrectionist Party. And I think it's really important for people in the media to recognize that and to listen to what Liz Cheney's saying. And when she says something like she still supports voter ID laws, instead to say, oh, she's just as bad as he. No, she's not. No, she's not. And you might actually want to look into the fact that 80% of Americans, according to a Gallup poll, support voter ID and enhanced voter ID for people to vote. Okay. And see, that's a debate. You want to have that debate. That's a debate that we can have between the guardrails of American democracy. All right. But for people to say, oh, well, if you support that, then you might as well be supporting storming the Capitol in 1/6. It's overly simplistic and it confuses the issues. Again, there are three parties in America. We have to recognize there's a Republican Party with people like Liz Cheney in there, Ben Sasse, Mitt Romney, others. There's a Democratic Party and there's an insurrectionist party for people that didn't recognize the 1/6 election, who are trying everything they can do to change the subject from 1/6. And don't want to face those facts. Jonathan, thanks so much for being there. A great interview with Liz Cheney, as always. Congratulations on that. It's very funny. I remember about a year ago, it must have been a year ago, 6 months ago on Twitter, somebody said, write the thing that will most surprise people about you. And Garry Kasparov, the great, obviously Russian chess master, who'd been harshly critical of Donald Trump and become something of a hero to many on the left, said, you all will be so surprised and so disappointed after Trump is gone by how conservative I actually am, to which I retweeted and said, amen. And Liz Cheney is there. She's being heralded by people who have attacked her entire life. And when we get beyond this, they will start attacking her again. But you hear that interview. Guess what? Newsflash. Liz Cheney is a conservative.
She's not only a conservative, she's probably on the right of the party. She's a very staunch conservative. And people forget, she was a warrior, a partisan warrior during the Obama years. She's now this anathema to the Republican base. But really, that's where her heart is. She's just decided to take a stand on January 6th and the big lie and Donald Trump. But the problem with all of this conversation is, you talk about there being three parties. She really is a fringe figure in the Republican Party. it's not that there's this huge group of people who support her and Ben Sasse and Mitt Romney. Empirically, there aren't in terms of Republican voters. 70% of Republican voters consider Joe Biden illegitimate. There's polling to show that. 70%. That's extraordinary. That's where the party has gone. And the party actually has left Liz Cheney. And the real challenge she has, if she's going to chart this new course for the party, is she has to bring these voters back to the party. Many of them have left the party, and it's not clear that the people who consider themselves Republican voters are going to be amenable to what Liz Cheney is selling.
Yeah. So what's her next move?
Well, it's unclear to me, actually. Her primary election in 2022 is going to become a proxy battle for the future and in her view, the soul of the Republican Party. Donald Trump and his political operation are desperately trying to find one person to run against her. They haven't figured out who yet. And the problem for them right now is there's a number of people who've declared themselves. One of them had impregnated a 14-year-old and described it as a Romeo and Juliet situation. So he seems to be out of the picture or at least receding from view. But the problem for them is if the field remains divided, she's got a decent chance. If they settle on one, she's in real trouble because you have to remember with Liz Cheney, this is the other point that's really important to understand. You look at again, empirical. She is 3 times more popular among Democratic voters than among Republican voters. So when you talk about, the parties, you really need to just remember where the Republican electorate is at. They're not where Liz Cheney is right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously, she'd like those ratios reversed. And so much of this may just depend on the passage of time, the understanding that Donald Trump's not going to run for re-election. If he doesn't run for re-election, yes. I heard somebody shout my name.
He said, sure.
Oh, sure. No, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry, Jonathan. So, yeah, it depends. Passage of time, Jonathan, also the possibility Donald Trump doesn't run again and Republicans start doing what they haven't done in some time and start focusing on who can get elected president of the United States in 2024.
Yeah, and where they're at the moment, it's a very fragmented party because you have the House Republican Conference, who their theory of the case is basically double down on Trump. And we need to elevate Trump and run into the midterms on Trump. Mitch McConnell, his view is ignore Trump, hope that he recedes into the background. It's a strategy based on hope. Liz Cheney is in a third camp. She believes that the Mitch McConnell approach is dangerous and you actually need to confront Donald Trump and talk about it right now and excise him from the party. So it's a real muddled mess. And I don't know how they resolve it, frankly.
It is Tuesday, the 25th of May of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash. A mere pinch of hot-smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has. And it always will. Hey, lots of news coming down the transom. We do have a curated show. We had to put a stop to it, as we always have to do. We got to look at what we can put out. And, the more obvious news stories we tend to pass up. I was going to speak yesterday at length from written reportage about Belarus. Forcing down the Ryanair Irish commercial airline to drag a journalist of dissidents now, apparently for writing bad reports about Lukashenko. So Belarus scrambled a MiG fighter jet, forced down this commercial airliner. It's actually a form of hijacking. Now, they, being the Belarusians, said that there was a bomb threat called on or for that plane. And so, of course, they had to bring it down. Of course. And you got the proof of life video with the Belarusian now apprehended journalist. There was a proof of life video where apparently, I guess, he admitted to his crimes or else. So we got that going now. So a lot going on there. That seems like a rather obvious type of news story that can be covered a lot better than what I would do. So it's a bit, it pulls at the heart. The reporter's dad is worried because apparently if you're a dissident journalist in Belarus, you have a death sentence hanging over your head. Wow. No wonder Trump called the press the enemy of the people. He wanted to do that too. I bet he's fuming right now. I was president of the United States. You mean I didn't do that? I could have? Yeah. And it looks like they're trying to angle to get him back in office again by hook and by crook. And I think a lot of emphasis upon the crook part. Liz Cheney at the top there. I've been warning everybody about Liz Cheney. Oh, Liz Cheney is our hero. No, she's not. She is not. She's a monster. She continues to be a monster. What the heck? Look, the only reason that the adults in the GOP are upset at Donald Trump is that Donald Trump's too overt in the way that he wants to steal elections. The GOP had a really good thing going in being able to steal elections. It was a little bit by process, but it was still stealing elections. And there wasn't much that anybody could say about it. Oh, well, I guess they're passing laws to gerrymander so that the Republicans get to stay in office. Oh, what can we do? Well, we'll have to go out and vote. And then the GOP would say, quiet now, quiet. And Donald Trump said, hey, look, we're going to steal your goddamn election because we're Nazis. And Lynn Cheney says, don't say that thing out loud. We've had a good thing going, and you're messing it up. And that's why she's pissed. They have no problem taking drop boxes away. They have no problem about limiting mail-in ballots. She's calling voter fraud. There's no voter fraud. The only voter fraud there has been a handful of voters who voted for Trump illegally. And with that, they say, oh, well, we have to get rid of democracy now. Really? We have to? Because you cheated and therefore everybody must be? I keep saying that the mindset in the GOP is they consider themselves to be above reproach. They are good people, and if they're able to cheat, think about what all the bad people are doing. Think of it. Well, I think about it a lot. And it's hard to get into the larcenous mind of a GOP voter and a GOP office holder, because they're one and the same. The GOP voter wishes that they could climb the ladder of success so they could kick all the people that, that they were kicked when people were on their way up. So now they want a chance to kick people. I like to think that if I'm going up the ladder of success, that I don't know, all boats rise when the water comes. I help everybody come on up. I don't think that because someone is making minimum wage at $15 an hour, that is somehow taking money out of my pocket. That reminds me, did you hear about the Las Vegas restaurant manager who's like really upset? He can't get anybody to work, and when people come in, they want to know how much they're going to make. They keep asking about how much they're going to make. What? Yeah, because he's used to paying them nothing and saying, hey, you'll make really good tips, though. And that used to be enough for a lot of people. But even making a lot of tips didn't mean that you could afford health benefits, for instance. Yeah, you're going to take your tip money, which is about enough to last you, and pay your bills for the week. And you have to still get to work because that costs money. So, yeah, I don't think you're putting it into a 401k. Some might, but generally not. So, yeah, restaurant manager all angry because potential workers want to know how much they're going to make per hour. Yeah. Okay. I guess that says everything you need to know about the capitalist system. Except that isn't really capitalist, is it? Because capitalist is really truly investing, in the capital markets. Not doing a thing and your money works for you. See, everybody says, I want my money working for me. I don't want to work. I want my money working for me. While at the same time, telling all those frontline workers at the grocery store, at the restaurants, get to work. Work for me while I'm not working. Okay. No wonder people don't want to go back to work because of people like that. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Of course, at the top, just because Lynn Cheney is now a fringe figure in the new GOP, it doesn't mean that she's a good person. It doesn't. I keep reminding people she is a monster. On the rest of the menu, a new natural resources study shows when wolves colonize a rural county, auto and deer collisions are reduced by 24%. The water crisis could not be worse on the Oregon-California border, and President Biden announced that he's doubling emergency spending to help communities prepare for hurricanes and other extreme weather events. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the EU says its tensions with the UK stem from Brexit, not the Northern Ireland Protocol. And Taiwan's bid to take part in the World Health Organization's annual assembly failed. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln because we have monitors. Thank you, Kelly, for doing so. To the left of the chat room link, across the page to the left near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, if you are able to afford the cost of an espresso type coffee drink, and if you could send those funds to us once a month, we're able to stretch those dollars as we have been doing for the last 10 years. That's right. We've been stretching dollars for 10 years of continuous resistance broadcasting, 24/7, 365. You can't get much more continuous than that. Do you know that surgeries, hell, even the deaths of loved ones has not stopped this powerhouse of resistance? Because our civic duty, or how we hold our civic duty, we hold it pretty darn high. We take it seriously. And all kidding aside, though we have a lot of gallows humor here, we do take this very seriously. There is a Nazi takeover, attempt to take over the United States, and I'm not being hyperbolic, one whit. But we stand arrayed against that takeover, and we have folks like you to thank for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty. So once again, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, send those funds to us once a month. We stretch those dollars beyond compare. We fly under the radar because we've been paying our bills thanks to you. And now we're continuing on maybe another 10 years of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance broadcast radio on the internet. And we have you to thank for doing so for the last 10 years, and we thank you for the upcoming 10 too. All right, thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can just go to @NetrootsRadio. It's so simple. Tom takes care of it, and thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter @JusticePutnam. That's all one word. And when you spell Putnam, it's N-A-M. Man spelled backwards. That's right. Anyway, follow me @JusticePutnam on Twitter. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. I get that posted and linked up on social media platforms like Twitter. Not on Facebook currently. We're going to have to wait until next month. Thank you, Zuckerberg. Thank you so much. Anyway, look for those show notes and links because that's where the real reportage is. And, you know, there's a lot more in there that will tell the full story, and you'll need to know that. Follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. All right. Yes, please do pick up podcasts. And if there's some sort of review or rating part of any of those podcast platforms, if you review us or do whatever they're asking, that moves us up in the search because we're all the way down to the W's. Yeah, well, that's what we do. Anyway, let's dive in. Tuck in to this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Christina Larson of the Associated Press brings us this first offering. Ecologist Rolf Peterson remembers driving remote stretches of road in Michigan's Upper Peninsula and seeing areas strewn with deer carcasses, but that changed after gray wolves arrived in the region from Canada and Minnesota. When the wolves moved in during the 90s and 2000s, the deer vehicle collisions went way down, said the Michigan tech researcher. Recently, another team of scientists has gathered data about road collisions and wolf movements in Wisconsin to quantify how the arrival of wolves there affected the frequency of deer auto collisions. They found it created what scientists call a landscape of fear. In a pretty short period of time, once wolves colonize a county, deer vehicle collisions go down about 24%, said Dominic Parker, a natural resources economist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and co-author of their new study published yesterday, Monday, in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Both thinning of the deer population by wolves and behavior changes in fearful deer are factors in the drop-off, Parker said. When you have a major predator around, it impacts how the prey behave, he said. Wolves use linear features of a landscape as travel corridors like roads, pipelines, and stream beds. Deer learn this and can adapt by staying away. Gray wolves, among the first species protected under the Endangered Species Act in 1973, were reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park in 1995, but in other regions of the U.S., gray wolves have dispersed naturally. The population in the lower 48 states now totals about 5,500. That seems like a lot. That doesn't seem like a lot to me. Now, the new study said that the presence of wolves maligned by ranchers whose livestock suffers predation also can save money by indirectly reducing deer vehicle collisions. In 2008, for instance, a study for the U.S. Department of Transportation estimated those crashes cost more than $8 billion with a B annually. Some studies have looked at tourism revenue generated by wolf watchers in Yellowstone, but that money doesn't flow directly to communities living alongside wolves. Jennifer Rayner, a natural resources economy at Wesleyan University and a co-author of the new study. We wanted to look at other ways the wolves impacted the region, she said. These auto collisions are happening or not happening in rural areas, and so are livestock damages. Michigan Tech's Peterson, who was not involved in the research, said, if anything, the researchers underestimated the value of deer vehicle crashes. The deeper dimensions of these collision costs can include large medical bills and sometimes human fatalities. A 2016 study found that cougars decreased the number of deer vehicle crashes in parts of the eastern U.S. by about 22%. The wolf study adds to growing awareness that scientists should consider both the costs and benefits of having large carnivores on the landscape, said Adrian Treves, a University of Wisconsin conservation biologist who was not involved in the study. Jillian Flackus of the AP brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The water crisis along the California-Oregon border went from dire to catastrophic as federal regulators shut off irrigation water to farmers from a critical reservoir and said they would not send extra water to dying salmon downstream or to a half-dozen wildlife refuges that harbor millions of migrating birds each year. In what is shaping up to be the worst water crisis in generations, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation said it will not release water this season into the main canal that feeds the bulk of the massive Klamath Reclamation Project, marking a first for the 114-year-old irrigation system. The agency announced last month that hundreds of irrigators would get dramatically less water than usual, but a worsening drought picture means water will be completely shut off instead. The entire region is an extreme or exceptional drought, according to federal monitoring reports, and Oregon's Klamath County is experiencing its driest year in 127 years. This year's drought conditions are bringing unprecedented hardship to the communities of the Klamath Basin, said Reclamation Deputy Commissioner Camille Touton, calling the decision one of historic consequence. Reclamation is dedicated to working with our water users, tribes, and partners to get through this difficult year and developing long-term solutions for the basin. The canal, a major component of the federally operated Klamath Reclamation Project, funnels Klamath River water from the Upper Klamath Lake, just north of the Oregon-California border, to more than 130,000 acres where generations of ranchers and farmers have grown hay, alfalfa, and potatoes, and grazed cattle. Only one irrigation district within the 200,000-acre project will receive any water from the Klamath River system this growing season, and it will have a severely limited supply. The Klamath Water Users Association said in a statement that some other farmers rely on water from a different river, and they will also have a limited supply. At the same time, the agency said it would not release any so-called flushing flows from the same dam on the Upper Klamath Lake to bolster water levels downstream in the Lower Klamath River. The river is key to the survival of coho salmon, which are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. In better water years, the pulses of water help keep the river cool and turbulent, conditions that help the fragile species exist. The fish are central to the diet and culture of the Yurok tribe, California's largest federally recognized tribe. Now, irrigators, meanwhile, reacted with disbelief as the news of the water shut-off in the canal spread. A newsletter published by the Klamath Water Users Association, which represents many of the region's farmers, blared the headline, "Worst Day in the History of the Klamath Project." Farmers reported already seeing dust storms that obscured visions for hundreds of yards, and they worried about their wells running dry. About 30 protesters showed up on Thursday last at the head gates of the main dam to protest the shutoff and ask the irrigation district to defy federal orders and divert the water. The Herald and News reported that they were with a group called People's Rights, a far-right organization founded by anti-government activist Eamon Bundy. Ben Duvall, president of the Klamath Water Users Association, acknowledged the Bundy involvement and urged his members to remain peaceful and not let the water crisis, quote, be hijacked for other causes, end quote. Matthew Daly and Darlene Superville of the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. President Joe Biden announced yesterday, Monday, that he's doubling U.S. emergency spending to help communities prepare for hurricanes and other extreme weather events, while launching a new effort at NASA to better understand and track the impact of climate change. The $1 billion in spending is a small fraction of what the U.S. spends on weather-related disasters. Last year alone, the nation endured 22 weather and climate-related disasters with losses greater than $1 billion each. The disasters include wildfires, hurricanes, and snowstorms, and had a cumulative price tag of nearly $100 billion. 2021 has already had significant winter storms that caused a deadly blackout in Texas, where Ted Cruz went to Cancun to escape it because he's such a brave, masculine man. And other states also experienced that blackout as well. Officials expect an ongoing severe drought in the West, which we just reported on in the Klamath Basin, and that will fuel destructive summer of wildfires following one of the worst fire years on record in 2020. Forecasters predict a busy hurricane season along the Atlantic Ocean and Gulf of Mexico, but perhaps not as severe as 2020's record-shattering year. We all know that the storms are coming, and we're going to be prepared, Biden said during a visit to FEMA's Washington headquarters. We have to be ready, he said. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration said last week that the hurricane season, which runs from June through November, will likely see 13 to 20 named storms, including at least 6 that will become hurricanes and 3 to 5 categorized as major hurricanes with winds of more than 110 miles per hour. FEMA will provide $1 billion for the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, or the BRIC program, which helps states, local communities, tribes, and territories to develop projects to prepare for and reduce risks from disasters and natural hazards. The White House also said it will develop a new NASA mission concept for an Earth System Observatory that will forecast and monitor natural disasters. The Earth System Observatory will deploy advanced technology in space to improve understanding of interactions between Earth's atmosphere, land, ocean, and ice, helping determine how climate change will play out in the near and long term. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, smoldering. It can be hard to think of movie stars as real people with real problems that shape what we see of their lives, but they are. Those Who Want Me Dead is here because Angelina Jolie liked the project, and she liked it because it fit where she's at right now. For the past few years, she's been mostly off camera. She's done voice work, she's directed, which she likes, but now she's on screen again. Why? Because she's getting divorced and is dealing with custody issues, and she doesn't have the time that directing requires, hence this movie and this particular movie. In Those Who Want Me Dead, Jolie plays Hannah, a smoke jumper, a firefighter who parachutes into wildfires, who no longer jumps and is healing her emotional wounds in a watchtower. It's there that she sees a young boy stumble out of the forest. He's being chased by killers, and now so is she. So it's a thriller, it's a survival story, there's action, but Jolie doesn't have to learn martial arts. She doesn't have to train. She just has to get beaten up, which is a thing these days. Have you noticed? So many movies and shows where characters go through them bloodied, bruised, and otherwise physically wounded. What is that about? Anyway, Jolie also wanted a chance to work with actor-turned-screenwriter Socorro Yellowstone, screenwriter-turned-director Taylor Sheridan. And if her co-stars are to be believed, Jolie is not the only one who appreciates Sheridan's affinity for nouveau westerns that have some grit and a focus on strong relationships. Speaking of relationships, not only does Jolie not have to be superhuman here, she also doesn't have to be super mom. Hannah is tough with her child charge, which Jolie says was a new character direction for her, which I find notable because I have long said one of the joys of Maleficent was watching Angelina Jolie, who loves children, play someone who tries not to fall in love with a child and fails. Now, you might expect Those Who Want Me Dead to be this big, high-powered star vehicle action film. That's not what it is. It's more this ensemble-like, even-paced thriller. It would be a quiet movie if they hadn't burned down a forest to make it. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Emily Schwing. Imagine this. You're in a lab in Indiana. Your arm's stuck in a box. The box is filled with bloodthirsty insects. And those insects, well, they intend to feed on you.
The staff scientist who works with me, Dr. Samuel Rund, he has a very good arm that he doesn't mind exposing to mosquitoes to feed off him.
Notre Dame professor Giles Duffield convinced a colleague to play the role of blood meal for his research on mosquito genetics and behavior. It's published in the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. Duffield cared less about whether his colleagues would be delicious. That was obvious. What he really wanted to know was, like humans kept awake by the light of their cell phones, would artificial lighting keep mosquitoes up and biting deep into the night? So Duffield and his colleagues created an experiment. They'd monitor the biting behaviors of mosquitoes who'd been exposed to pulses of artificial light throughout the night.
The effect on the biting at night were approaching those that we would see during the late afternoon when we expect to see their peak biting. It doubled their feeding activity. So it's not a small change. It's a very robust increase in their biting behavior.
There are a number of different species of mosquitoes, and they behave in different ways. Some bite only at night. Others are daytime feeders. But there's one species in particular that Duffield and colleagues were focused on, Aedes aegypti.
Aedes aegypti has sort of evolved alongside humans and is very adept to living within human habitation. So any sort of environmental changes that would influence its feeding and biting behavior could have huge ramifications on humans, probably more than any other mosquito species.
Duffield says Aedes aegypti are the major vector for the human transmission of diseases like encephalitis, chikungunya, malaria, dengue, fever, and the Zika virus. These are all diseases that have made headlines in recent years. And that's why he needed his colleague's arm.
We feel as though this is a nice, simple assay, and it represents a more natural stimulus for the mosquito. Carbon dioxide, odorant, smells, body temperature, the attraction to warmth, and the physical skin and the chemicals that are released from the skin. So it certainly represents a more natural mosquito host biting response. But yeah, it's unfortunate for those who are the investigators because when you get 30 mosquito bites per assay, it's painful sometimes.
The next step is to look at how different species of mosquitoes respond to different kinds of light.
That's something that we're busy trying to investigate right now. In the original experimentation, we just used broad spectrum white light. As we fine-tune our current and future experiments, we're interested in seeing if specific wavelengths or color spectrums of light have the same effect or less effect.
And Duffield has some ideas.
Possibly the brighter the light, the larger the effect. But again, you may find that extremely bright light inhibits the mosquito. So there may be a sort of sweet spot in the intensity of light, the illuminance.
He says the color of light and the time of night when mosquitoes are exposed to light are also parameters worth exploring. He's also interested in studying different species of bloodsucker. Not all mosquitoes feed at night. Since some mosquitoes are day feeders, it raises the question of whether artificial light at night would affect them at all. Eventually, the goal is to figure out if they can make recommendations on how people in mosquito-prone parts of the world should light their homes. In the short term, though, future findings will hopefully disarm hungry mosquitoes while preserving the arms of the study subjects they feed on. For 60 Second Science, I'm Emily Schwing.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best tests for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day trucking bosses and leading Teamsters in Minneapolis reached a tentative agreement after a tumultuous week of fighting in the city market. Strikers won many of their demands, including union recognition and the reinstatement of all strikers. Such a thorough victory at the Battle of Deputies Run earlier in the week had shaken the city's elites to their core. As the dust settled on the picket lines, Governor Floyd Olson had called a 24-hour truce in an effort to organize negotiations. The debacle of Ohio National Guardsmen attacking Toledo strikers had reached Minneapolis. Fears of a growing Red Menace fueled demands for a settlement, prompting Olson to order National Guardsmen into the city's armories armed to the teeth. Historian Brian Palmer, author of Revolutionary Teamsters, The Minneapolis Trucker Strikes of 1934, observed that the May 25th deal settled the strike quickly enough, but final victory would be postponed. Strike leaders had to choose which concessions to make under immense pressure from state politicians, intractable employers, and federal mediators. They also worked to avoid a potentially deadly confrontation with the National Guard. Above all, they demanded union recognition, agreed to arbitration of future disputes, and withdrew the demand for a closed shop. There was no contract, and the inclusion of inside workers proved contentious. Palmer adds the gains were limited but real enough, as strike leaders spelled out what had begun as a violent assault on strikers ended with workers fighting in their own interests, learning that they had only their union to rely on. The open shop offensive was defeated, and union recognition was won. In the weeks ahead, it would become clear the fight was far from over. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 51 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting to be much cooler than yesterday, topping out only around 65 or so. We were above 70, bumping 80 yesterday. Cloudy early with peaks of sunshine expected late. A stray shower or thunderstorm is possible. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. We did have a spot of rain drop periodically overnight, and that's good. We were expecting a bit more this morning, but it looks like it will be sporadic at best. Partly cloudy tonight with lows in the mid-40s, winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Sunshine and clouds mixed tomorrow with highs near 80 degrees Fahrenheit, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon. The updated totals from the weekend have now been tabulated, and we have risen perilously, now at 11,121. That's about 40 extra cases. And people still refuse to follow the most basic protocols, let alone get vaccinated. And now our deceased have risen from 141 to 143 confirmed. Grass pollen is rated very high right outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 23 parts per million. And my God, that daytime UV index is very high, but it has gone up from 8 to 9. Put on the SP50 or more. Just don't even question it, okay? Please. It's for your own good. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.12 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 80%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and we call that the Weather Underground. London is 56 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 60 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 74 degrees and fair. Kyiv is 72 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 80 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 80 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 72 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 64 and clear. San Francisco, California is 53 and cloudy. And New York is 62 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The European Union's tensions with former member Britain are not due to problems with the Northern Ireland Protocol that was agreed to by both sides, but Brexit itself, the head of the bloc's executive said today. Ursula von der Leyen told a news conference after the first day of the EU summit in Brussels that all 27 member states of the bloc agreed that there can be no alternative to a full and correct implementation of the protocol. There should be no doubt that there is no alternative to the full and correct implementation of the protocol, she said. It is important to reiterate that the protocol is the only possible solution to ensure peace and stability in Northern Ireland while protecting the integrity of the European Union single market, von der Leyen added. If we see problems today, we should not forget that they do not come from the protocol, but result from Brexit. That is the reason why the problems are here.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more staff at Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Taiwan's bid to take part in the annual Ministerial Assembly of the World Health Organization formally ended yesterday, Monday, despite support from a handful of countries, including allies of the U.S. The decision not to include Taiwan on the agenda, taken by WHO's General Committee, was announced by Bhutan's Health Minister Dasho Dechen Wangmo, who serves as president of the week-long assembly. Minutes earlier in the debate, Zhen Chu, China's ambassador to the UN in Geneva, called on countries supporting Taiwan's participation in the WHO Ministerial Assembly to stop politicizing the issue and to uphold the One China principle. Well, well, well. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme aux langues de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.